Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lauren. Today is the second video in my Agoraphobia series. We're going to be talking all about exposure sessions, exposure therapy, whatever you want to call it. I did try to film this video yesterday and I don't know what's happened to me, but in quarantine, this weird like COVID isolation thing, I have just like lost the ability to speak properly. Like I can't make words, and I tried for so long yesterday to film this video and it just I just kept tripping over my words and things weren't coming out right. And I was like, this video is going to be no value to anyone the way it is. I will try and edit out where I don't make sense, but I'm sorry if this video is a little bit all over the place. So there are two questions that I get asked the most frequently when it comes to my experience with agoraphobia and my experience with exposure sessions. That's pig wanting to play. The first question is, how long did it take you? And the second question is, how exactly did you do it? So I'm just gonna answer those straight off the bat just to get it out of the way. There's nothing I can do about this, I'm sorry. The answer to the first question, how long did it take you? It took me a couple of years. I wasn't agoraphobic one day and then unagoraphobic the next. It was a gradual thing that happened over time. How exactly did I do it? I didn't really follow any kind of rigid procedure or I didn't have a plan set out. Basically what happened was when my daughter was born in March, I knew that I had to get better because I knew I couldn't give my daughter the life that I wanted her to have by being stuck at home. I spoke about this in my first video. I wrote a list of all the reasons that I wanted to get better, and that was at the forefront of my mind. I knew that it was time to get out of the house. At this stage, I had been housebound for maybe 2 years prior to that, but I also hadn't been doing exposure sessions. I had just been sort of getting worse during that time. Like my world had been getting smaller and smaller and smaller until we got to March of 2015, where it got to basically its smallest point, and I literally was terrified of the whole world. What I started doing when my daughter was maybe like a month old, and I'd sort of recovered from like the jarring reality of being a first-time parent, I would put her in a little baby wrap carrier thing, or sometimes even in the pram, and I would take her out the front door and we would walk down the street, and I would just see how far I could get until I had a complete meltdown and had to come home. So I know a lot of the first couple of times I literally just got like a couple of houses away. I'm sitting at my front window and I can see the point where I would get to and then need to turn around and come home. So it really wasn't very far. And then I had a goal that I wanted to get to the grocery store that's about maybe a 7-minute walk from my house. I would leave my house and I would try to get to that point. And once I got to there, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try and get a little bit further. I'm gonna try and get to, there's a river near my house. I'm gonna try and get to there so I can go for a longer walk. And it basically was just the idea of, I'm going to go outside every day and I'm gonna see how far I can get. In saying that, some days I didn't get outside. Like I said, I had a newborn daughter. She didn't sleep a lot. There were days where I was exhausted, she was crying, I was anxious and stressed, and I just couldn't do it. So on those days, I was like, you know what, I'm not doing it today. But I guess the silver lining was it kind of helped my sanity and her sanity, I reckon as well, for us to get some fresh air every day. So I had that extra push of wanting to get outside because I was like, we both need this. We both need a little walk. So that was how I did that. I just kept trying to get further. And eventually my goal was to be able to just take my daughter on a walk every day, put her in the pram and get out for a morning exercise walk of say like 45 minutes or so. That was kind of what I was trying to build up to. Driving was the biggest trigger for me. Driving, I hated being in the car. Like it was hard enough for me being out on a walk, but being in the car was 100 times worse because I just felt so trapped. Now I know that if I'm ever in the car and I feel like I need to not be in the car, I can literally just pull over and get out of the car. But back in that stage, I was so locked in my own head all the time that I just felt like if I panicked in the car, there was no escape, there was nowhere to go. It was terrifying to me. So basically the car, I did the same thing that I did with the walking. I would get in the car, I would put my daughter in her little baby seat, and I would see how far I could drive until I couldn't drive anymore. And again, a lot of the time that was literally just the end of the street. I would get to the end of the street and then I would pull out onto the main road, and then about a minute up the road, I would become overwhelmed with panic and I would turn around and come back. And I just kept doing that. I kept at it. My goal was to get to the shopping center, which is about 3 kilometers away, I want to say. And so I knew that I just had to keep driving. I just had to keep trying every day, trying to get there.
Okay, I am currently driving to the local shopping center, I guess you'd call it. It doesn't feel local when you're agoraphobic.
It probably took me about 3 or 4 tries to be able to drive to that shopping center. Once I got to that shopping center, I just would go in and I would walk around.
Okay, so I've just parked my car at the shopping center. I've got Lila in the car. I look so green in this. I'm going to put her in the Moby wrap, which is what I'm wearing now, which is why I look a bit weird. I'm gonna put her in this. Starting to panic. Go and get the groceries. Can't even think right because I'm just freaking out. Wish me luck.
And I would give myself these little goals of like, today I'm gonna go to Target and buy a scented candle because I need one. I would lock onto that. I'd be like, that's my mission today. But some days I couldn't do that. So some days I'd get so worked up once I was at the shopping center that I just have to walk around in circles and just look at things until I calm down. Some days I would get to the shopping center, but then I would become so stressed about having to get back in the car and driving home that I would panic and I would sort of be stuck at the shopping center for a little while. That was scary at the time, but also it was something that I had to go through. I had to go through that panic and that fear to teach myself that I was going to be okay. So eventually all I would do in those situations was I would just keep walking around. A little library at my local shopping center, so I would often go in there and I would just let Lila roll around on the floor while I read a book, and I would just try and calm down. And then as soon as I felt calm enough, I would get back in the car and I would scoot back home. Yeah, that was basically it. I just kept giving myself these little goals and I just kept trying to work towards them. Because my daughter was young, I had to take her to her immunizations. I was supposed to take her to mother's group. I had to take her to maternal health nurse checkups every couple of months. So I knew there were places that I had to be, so I would try and work my way up to those. For example, with mother's group, I think I ended up going on the 3rd session because the first 2 sessions I tried. I put makeup on and I got ready to go and I got ready to leave the house and I just couldn't. I couldn't leave the house. So I was like, it's okay. Next time you try again and you try and get there. The next time, try it again. Couldn't do it, was too nervous. And then the 3rd time I was like, it's okay, try again. I made it and it was terrifying, but the idea was that I knew I just had to keep on trying to get there and eventually I would. I just had to keep trying to get a little bit further each time. And then eventually I would get where I needed to go. Good thing was, once my comfort zone started to grow, like once I was able to get to a restaurant, say 10 minutes from home, my family was like, hey, maybe we should try going to this restaurant that's like a little bit further away. Okay, I'll try. Again, sometimes I didn't make it, but sometimes I did. I started to be able to say yes to friends when they were like, hey, I'm having, birthday drinks at this pub. It's near you. Do you think you can come? I would try and go, and I got there. And so as my comfort zone grew, I was able to keep adding more things into the mix.
We're just on the way home. We've just finished up and it was a really good night. I didn't feel really any anxiety at all. I had lots of fun.
Eventually, when I started to be able to drive a bit further away, so when I was able to sit in the car for 20 minutes and I got a little more confident with being able to sit in the car for that long, I started to explore when I was in the car. So instead of going the direct route somewhere that the area that I knew, I would take different ways there. I would drive down side streets that I'd never driven down before. I would just try and explore a little bit more and kind of like testing the edges of my comfort zone and seeing how far I could get. Once I got comfortable with that, I was like, okay, maybe now I can manage driving with somebody else in the car. First, I had to be the one driving because I had to be in control of the car. And eventually I was like, all right, I'll try and be the passenger, and I had somebody else drive. Basically, all I did to simplify it was I kept doing the things that scared me. And in the beginning, they were very small things, like going for a walk outside my house was terrifying, but that's what I did. And then eventually I made it a bigger thing and a bigger thing. It wasn't like I got in the car and I drove for an hour straight off the bat. I took very small, very deliberate steps in the right direction. That was basically it. I know it sounds really simple, and I also know that it wasn't simple. It was really, really hard. And like I said, some days I couldn't do it. Some days I would get to a stage where I was going out every day for a walk. I was going out for a 10 to 20 minute drive. I was going to a yoga class, but then I'd have 3 days where suddenly I felt like I couldn't go anywhere. I would have a panic attack in the car and it felt like it would set me backwards, and I was suddenly terrified to go on a walk again. When that happened, what I did was I just kept telling myself, you have to try again. Today, you can't do it for whatever reason, but tomorrow you will try again. And then when I tried again, I had this like extra determination. I was like, you know what? I didn't do it last time, but this time I'm gonna do it. And I would do it most of the time. The thing that I think was most important with me was that the repetition, because I kept repeating it every day, because I went for a walk every day, because I tried to go to the shops every day, the repetition and the momentum of that, it meant that I kept going and I kept going further each time. It really sucks when you try to do exposure sessions. You tell yourself, okay, this week I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna go for a walk. And you go for a walk and it's terrifying and you feel like, you're gonna panic and you can't do it, and you run home and then you're like, I can't try again. I cannot try again. And maybe, 2 weeks passes and you try once more, but then you don't try again for another 3 weeks. You have to keep the momentum up. You have to keep going. It's going to be hard, but if you don't keep the ball rolling, so to speak, it's gonna stop. And it's gonna be that much harder when you do try again. So you have to keep taking, like I said, small, deliberate steps each day. Even if one day, say I had given myself this goal of, driving 20 minutes away, but I'd only gotten 7 minutes and I'd panicked and I'd come home, I would make sure that when I came home, I would at least get out for a little walk. Even if I just went 5 minutes down the street, I was like, okay, so I wasn't able to do X, but instead I'm gonna do Y or Z. I always made sure that I got out and that I did something, anything, just to keep the momentum going. A lot of the bigger goals that I hit, so the first time I went to the city, the first time I went to a friend's wedding, the first time I went into the city by myself on public transport, I have posted those videos on my channel. So those are there for you to watch, to know exactly what kind of headspace I was in at that point in time. But basically, yeah, once I hit one goal, I would make another goal, and then I'd make another goal, and I just kept on going. So that brings me to the next part. What are my tips for exposure sessions? My number one tip for doing exposure therapy or exposure sessions when you have agoraphobia is don't wait until you feel ready. You are not going to feel ready. You might feel in the right mindset and you might feel motivated, but your body physically is not going to feel ready. I want you to think of a time in your life when you did something scary. For example, like say, I remember when I was younger, when I was like, I want to say 8 maybe, and we were at a public swimming pool and there was a big diving board. And I really wanted to jump off the one at the top, but I was scared. And I was like, no, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. So I'd climb up the ladder and I would get up to the top of the biggest diving board, and I'd be standing on the very edge, and then suddenly my body would rush with this like terrifying feeling, and I'd be like, I can't do it, I can't do it. That's exactly what your body is doing when you're thinking about exposure sessions and you're like, I'm gonna go for a walk. Your body is like, no, you're not. We're not doing this. This is terrifying. It's not happening. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. When I was up on that diving board, I think it was either my sister came up because she wanted to go down and she was like, hurry up, jump. Or maybe like there were other kids waiting. I don't know what it was. I don't remember. But I do remember that my body wasn't ready, but my brain was like, go, jump. So I just did. My body wasn't ready, but I did it. And it was scary. It didn't feel good. But then as soon as I hit the water, I was like, that was amazing. Let's do it again. When you overcome that feeling in your body that's telling you to pull back, but you push yourself forward, it is a good feeling eventually. But to begin with, it's not a good feeling. It feels terrifying. My point with this story is your body is not going to feel ready. When you go to leave the house, when you go for a walk, your body is going to be like, we're not doing this today. I don't want to do this. It's going to be sounding the alarm. You're going to be freaking out. You need to do it regardless. You are not going to feel ready. You need to push yourself to do it when you're not ready. That brings me to tip number 2. You are going to panic. It's not going to feel good. You are going to freak out. It's going to be uncomfortable. You guys know this, I've always said it, I always had that sensation that I was either going to shit my pants or pee my pants, and I always had that sensation. It was there until I kept teaching myself that that wasn't going to happen, and the only way that I taught myself that was by continually feeling that sensation and it not happening. You need to know that you are going to panic, and you need to keep telling yourself that and just say, you know what, I am going to have a panic attack. I can expect that. Once you expect that, it gives you kind of the space to be like, okay, I know that's going to happen, so I can stop fighting against that. So now I can focus instead on just keeping the action going, keeping moving forward, knowing that I'm going to panic. The more energy you spend trying to be like, I don't want to panic, I don't want to panic, I hope I'm not going to panic, the less energy you'll have to do the thing. Third tip, it will get easier. I know there's a point that you get to where you're like, I've been doing these exposure sessions for, X amount of months. When is it going to get easier? It's not getting easier. It will. It's one of those things that happens slowly and then suddenly. One of those things that happens without you realizing. Suddenly you can go for a walk 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes away from home, and you're like, hey, I didn't panic as much as I used to. It will get easier, but it takes time. You are rewiring your brain. You are learning a new habit, basically. It's like when you learn to ride a bike, or when you learn to write words, when you learn to do maths, which I still haven't learned to do properly. It takes time. You don't pick it up straight away. Your brain doesn't just one day go, okay, I'm agoraphobic. It takes time for your brain to learn that there isn't danger out there, but it does learn it eventually. You need to keep going in order to get to that point. It takes a while for your brain to catch up and to go, hey, this isn't actually so bad. Your gut reaction initially and for the first couple of times is going to be like, I can't do this. This sucks. This hurts. This is painful. I don't like it. I can't do it. Because that's the story that you've been telling yourself for so long. That's the sensations that you've had. That's the feelings that you've been having. That's the thoughts that you've been having. It takes time for your brain to go, this isn't as bad as it once was, right? It's going to take time, but it does get easier, I promise. Tip number 4, keep a record. This really, really, really helps. I spoke about this in my first video in terms of mindset. I said that you really wanted to build a community of people, and I said that posting about your journey on social media is going to be helpful. I can't tell you how helpful it was when I posted on my Instagram when I first started doing exposure sessions. Having that place where I could report what I was going through, and then I could get support from other people going through the same thing, was invaluable. People would give me advice, they'd give me support, they'd give me understanding. The picture of one day where I didn't make it to somewhere that I wanted to go, and then there's a post, 2 posts later where I did make it where I wanted to go, and I was like so proud of myself. And I have both of those to look back on. And there were also a lot of times where I would be in my car and I would be freaking out, and I would think to myself, I really want to be able to post about, getting to where I want to go. I want to share with everyone that I did it, that I beat my fears. It would give me that extra push. So keep a record, even if you don't do it on social media, even if you just keep a journal. It's going to help you with your momentum, and it's going to help you with a sense of achievement, and it's going to help you know that you did get from point A to point B. Your journey from agoraphobic to unagoraphobic is going to be one of the most important journeys that you are going to go through in your life, and you want a record of this, I promise you. This is my life. The next tips I have are for specific places in particular, the grocery store and driving, because these can be big triggers for people, and I get that because they were big triggers for me too. In terms of the grocery store, my first tip is to make eye contact. This is really, really hard, but it really helps. I found that when I was walking through the grocery store and I was like sweating and feeling anxious and panicked, I really wanted to look away from people. When we are fearful, we are closed off. We don't want to connect with other people because we are stuck in our own heads. So something that was helpful was when someone walked past, I would force myself to make eye contact with them, and more often than not, they'd smile, I'd smile. And then I would be like, oh yeah, like there's a whole world out here. And it would help me to open up out of my fear and realize that I wasn't alone in this terrifying place. Like there are other people here. I don't have to feel so isolated. The next thing that helped is if I was standing in line at the grocery store and I started to have a panic attack, it really helps to lean into that panic. It helps to breathe through it instead of like working yourself up into a state where you're like, I have to get out of this line. I have to get out of this line. I would just force myself to stand there. A lot of the time this was because I was in line at Aldi, and once you're in line at Aldi, there's kind of nowhere to go. Like you can't go forward, you can't go back. Your stuff's on the conveyor belt, like where are you gonna go? So I would be standing there and I would be itching to get out of that grocery store line. I'd be like, I have to get out of this line. I'm having a panic attack. I'm gonna pee my pants. I have to get out. But I had nowhere to go. So I just had to stand there. And always the panic would peak and then it would dissipate. I've spoken about this in other videos before. Panic attacks are gonna have this point where you're like, I cannot take any more, but they are always gonna drop. The thing is, when you leave at that peak point, you are teaching yourself that you can't handle the rest of it. You're like, okay, when I hit that peak point, I have to go. And so the next time you're trying to do something scary, you're gonna hit that peak point and you're gonna go. You're gonna keep doing the same thing. So what you need to do is you need to stand there and lean into the panic attack. Wait till it hits the peak point and then just wait. Just know that it is going to drop. It is not going to stay at that high point of adrenaline forever. And then there is that moment of release. It does come, you just have to wait it out. Know that it is going to pass. Know that it is going to be okay. Know that all you need to do is just stand there and feel the sensations, because the sensations are the scariest part. Okay? What you're feeling right now is already the worst part. If you are standing in line and you are freaking and you're like, I can't cope with this, you try and make eye contact with someone, you can't because they're not looking at you. The next thing that I would do is I would look around me and I would start really noticing things. So I would look at the ingredients on the back of whatever I was buying. Try and count how many ingredients you know. Try and count the items on the conveyor belt. Anything you can do to get that like thinking brain back online instead of that survival brain. Focus on the breath, count the objects in front of you, count the ingredients on the ingredient list. Anything to get your logical, rational brain back in the driver's seat is going to help in that moment. In terms of driving exposures, one of the things that was really, really helpful for me was listening to podcasts while I was driving, or audio tapes. I listened to a lot of Tony Robbins back in those early days of trying to drive, and I would let myself get really pumped up by what he was saying. Another thing that helped me was because I was filming myself a lot of the time as well when I was doing those driving exposures, I was talking because I was trying to talk to the camera. A lot of the time I wasn't even making sense. I was just like mumbling randomly, but that act of talking helped because it's another thing that gets your logical, rational brain back online. So it might feel stupid, but if you're in the car and you're trying to do driving sessions, talk to yourself, or if there's someone next to you, talk to them. Talk through what you're feeling, name what you're feeling. I would say, now I'm feeling really anxious, now I'm feeling really panicked, now I'm feeling like I'm gonna shit my pants, and it's scary, and I don't like it, and I'm feeling uncomfortable, and now I'm feeling weird sensations. Just keep naming it. If that's all you do, that is going to help. Also remember that you can pull over if and when you need to. It's something that you have to keep reminding yourself, because like I said back then, I would forget that. I would just feel so trapped that I would forget that I could pull over and get out of the car if I needed to. If it gets too much, pull the car over, get out, walk around, take a few deep breaths. Something else that helped was making a Spotify playlist specifically for driving. I had these songs that I loved to sing, I knew the words to, I'd let myself get really pumped up. This didn't always work because sometimes the panic attack, I would get too locked into it. But it did help me to get further, especially when I got somewhere where I needed to go. I had this, I can't remember what song it was, but I know it was a song that I used to play all the time, and it was like my victory song, and I would sing along to it, and it would make me feel so good. And then once I was singing that, I would be able to drive somewhere else because I was so pumped up and motivated. And again, something that helps with driving anxiety is expect to be anxious. Know that you are going to panic. Know that that is okay to panic. My main tip though with exposure sessions is just get out there and keep doing it. Keep on going. Make it a habit to do it every day. You can also make your exposure sessions somewhere that relates to where you want to be in your life. So when I spoke in the first video about mindset, one of the goals I had was that I wanted Lila to be able to socialize with other kids. I wanted her to meet other kids. I wanted her to go to a play group and things like that. So I joined the mothers group. I joined a play group as well, and that became an exposure session for me. Trying to get myself and Lila to the play group, that was an exposure. Meeting other mums there, that was an exposure. I kind of made everything an exposure session, but it helped when it wasn't always just about trying to beat agoraphobia. It helped when it was about something else. If you did your mindset list and you wrote the list of things that you want to achieve in life, maybe if one of them was that you want to learn a different language, maybe you make an exposure session around joining a language class, going to a local school or TAFE or whatever. Maybe that becomes your exposure session, trying to get there. And then you might meet people there that you're like, okay, an exposure goal is going to be going out for coffee after class with them. That's an exposure goal. Don't always make it about beating your anxiety and beating agoraphobia. Make it about living your life in general. I really hope this video helped in some way. I'm sorry again if I didn't make sense in a lot of places. Honestly, this COVID quarantine thing has done weird things to my brain. And I know I'm not the only one because I posted on Instagram about it, and a lot of you were like, I'm feeling the same way. I literally can't make words. If there's one thing I want you to take from this video is that yes, it is going to be hard. Yes, you are going to panic. No, your body is not going to feel ready to do it, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but you need to do it anyway. Come back to this video whenever you need to, whenever you need an extra pep talk, but know that you can do it. The fear is the scariest part. Okay? Out there is not as scary as you're making it out to be. What is scary is what's in here. If you can sit with that and let that be there and say, okay, I know that these fear sensations and that these uncomfortable feelings and these uncomfortable thoughts are there, but I'm just going to do the thing regardless. The more you do that, the less those thoughts are there, the less those fear sensations are there, the easier it gets for you to go out and not feel that way, but you have to do the action anyway. Guys, I hope that helps. If you are going on an exposure session today, comment down below. Let's support each other through this process. Sending you all the love.